I'll just wait until a few come in, but welcome everybody. You're here at TGP's Reinforcing Responsible Sourcing panel. It's noon now, so we have a bunch of people hopping on. And I'm just going to get started so that we can keep the panel moving and get as much content and information in as possible. So before we get started, I wanted to give you all a little bit of background about who the Green Program is. Some of you who are listening in might be TGP alumni or students that are currently accepted into a program, or someone that just heard about the Green Program because of this panel. So at the Green Program, we strive to empower and educate future sustainability leaders. We have a really innovative career-focused model, and I've traveled with over 3,200 students and professionals and people really passionate about, becoming a global citizen. And we're super excited today to be celebrating Earth Day with you all. It is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, so a big one. And this week we have committed to a theme of mobilizing for change, which actually directly aligns with the global mission for Earth Day, which is climate action. So happened to be a really great alignment. We didn't plan for that, but here we are. We had found great alignment. So as we celebrate this first mobilization for change for the environment, we're really excited to explore how the largest industries today are innovating and advocating for the environment. And today we're going to do that in a topic on reinforcing responsible sourcing. So with this panel, we have a chat bar where my colleague Melissa is going to be chatting with you guys and wanting to just learn more from you audience members as well. So if you go on your screen and open your chat bar, definitely keep that up throughout the whole session so that you can engage with us. First off, please tell us who you are, what's your name, where you're coming in from, and maybe why you're tuning in and what makes you want to mobilize for the environment. We love to hear that. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session for you guys to ask the panelists your own questions. And as through the session, I'll have these questions for the panelists, but we definitely would love to hear your feedback as well. I know that all of you who are tuning in are interested in this topic in some way, shape, or form. So we definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on the questions as well. So without further ado, let's introduce some of our panelists. Yuna, can you come on and just tell us where you're tuning in from and who you are?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Yuna. I'm a responsible sourcing specialist at Fitbit. I joined the Green Program back in 2018 when I joined the Peru Summer Program for learning water management. And yeah, I'm working on a lot of IT responsible sourcing work.
Awesome, great. Parker, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey everybody, it's super awesome to be here, especially on Earth Day. I'm super fired up. So I'm the founder and CEO of Grounded Upcycling, and I'm also a Green Program alumni. So it's such an honor to be invited back to speak. I went to Iceland with the Green Program back in 2016, and then I also did an alumni reunion trip this past summer to Slovenia and Croatia, which was super fun. So yeah, just a brief overview. Grounded Upcycling is a super early stage startup in the urban agriculture space based in New York City. And we turn waste into food. And we like to put waste in air quotes because we don't believe in waste. Humans are the only animal that creates waste. So what we do is we transform urban byproducts, organic materials like spent coffee grounds, cardboard, sawdust. We use that to make an edible mushroom substrate that we sell into the commercial mushroom industry. So super excited to learn from my fellow panelists and just get to know all of you. So thanks for having me.
Great, thanks so much. Kevin, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Kevin. I am a global sustainability manager at Nike. I'm also a Green Program alum. I did 2 back-to-back programs, I think with like 2 days in between. I was in Peru and then had like a day of layovers and then went straight to Japan. I think the Green Program is a family that just keeps on giving through different platforms and connects people who probably wouldn't have met otherwise in person or virtually, but just such an incredible platform to connect like-minded people, especially on today, which is Earth Day. But happy to be here and excited to chat.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, guys. And like I said, all of you people listening in, if you could please introduce yourselves and tell us, why you're tuning in, what got you interested in this topic, and we'll get started, asking some questions to our panelists. So first question from my end, I'd love to just know more about what responsible sourcing looks like to you all in an ideal world, and maybe what it actually looks like in your organization today. Maybe Parker, could you maybe start with this and let us know your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, sure. So the way that I look at responsible sourcing generally, but also how it pertains to my day-to-day, it's kind of first inspired by the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, kind of thinking through individual material flows and how we should be treating both technical nutrients that humans produce, like plastics, metals, things of that nature, and then also biological nutrients that should be endlessly cycled in nature. So that's kind of influenced a lot of my thinking with Grounded, and thinking about ways to source materials creatively. So instead of going out into the linear economy and trying to source virgin materials from sourcing specialists or input providers, we try to look at what's available either through waste or maybe like rejected streams that are abundant all around us. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about responsible sourcing as it pertains to my work.
Awesome. I know that you're coming from a tech background. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what responsible sourcing looks like in the tech world, and where it is currently and maybe where it could go?
Yeah, so responsible sourcing and tech would oftentimes involve a lot of labor rights, such as living wage, and it would also be sometimes talking about like the material safety, which can include chemicals, a lot of hot topics that a lot of professionals are discussing in this field would be conflict minerals, where a lot of IT devices are actually sometimes getting sourced from conflicted region in Africa. So we try to make sure that in our supply chain, there's no forced labor involved. So that's something that we're trying to discuss as an industry as a whole, continue discussion and track down the supply chain. Yeah, so yeah.
Great, yeah, and Kevin, what about in the apparel industry? What does responsible sourcing look like, and maybe how does it look in Nike right now?
I would say there's probably two keywords that are top of mind within this industry. One is transparency, and the other one is circularity. First, regarding transparency, just understanding where your clothes are made and how they're made, where the cotton or the polyester came from, I think is something that we as an industry struggle a lot with. On one end of the spectrum, you have a Patagonia or a Reformation who controls their own supply chain just because of their limited quantity. But then on the other side, you have your H&M, your Zara's, and your Nikes who are huge. And we just simply cannot maintain the level of autonomy and transparency to the degree that a Reformation or Patagonia can. So doing everything we can to ensure transparency encourages sustainable sourcing. The second is circularity. I think fashion is one of those industries that, with the uprising of fast fashion or just consumer trends, honestly, the shelf life of a shirt or a jacket in the average consumer's closet is a year, right? So thinking about how do we treat all the waste streams that come out of the inevitable changes in trends or styles starts from the very beginning. Recyclable cotton, fairly sourced from recycled materials. So I think that's how we think about sourcing circularity.
Great. Yeah. And Kevin, I'd love to hear more. I know in our previous conversations, we talked a little bit about, the standards to which, Nike is creating for their responsible sourcing. Could you talk a little bit more about, what those standards are and, how you and your partners kind of hold yourselves to those standards?
Yeah, I think this probably goes for every single private company or private sector. If Fitbit, if Nike, if Ford came up with their own standards and said this is the standard, this is the bar, no one would believe them, right? Just because it's self-imposed. So I think partnering with NGOs and government organizations is vital. So we partner with a lot of public sector organizations like United Nations, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, Clean Cargo Working Group, Smart Ways, to gain the credibility and I guess the objective belief of the consumer. So we have our own standards, but it's all about partnering with NGOs whose pure job is to come up with these industry standards that we can all agree upon. So I would say that's kind of how we establish our standards. The primary ones within the fashion industry is the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. So if you ever want to see who are the companies that have spoken up to be sustainable, just look up the SAC. The co-creators are Patagonia, Walmart, Nordstrom, Nike, and I want to say a couple other players in this discipline, but the main prerogative is partnering with NGOs.
Great. Yeah, I think it's a good segue. But before we go into kind of what partners look like, Parker, do you have any other thoughts on this idea of standards within the ag space? I know that you guys have currently shifted into that. So what does creating standards for sourcing in your organization look like?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So in New York, we work with a lot of coffee shop partners, and we're providing an essential service to their operation by collecting their byproducts. And it's fascinating to see how much emphasis specialty coffee producers and roasters and how much investment they've made into fair trade, sometimes buying direct from farms at the origin. But the second that material has been brewed or served to the customer, the value goes away completely. If you think about what's actually in your cup of coffee, it's 99% water. So what's left over is actually what we deal with, and we see a lot of value in that, and try to keep those sourcing standards almost alive throughout our supply chain, and just continuing the life of that material. But it's challenging because you're fighting a paradigm of waste, and it's kind of conceived in people's minds that it's valueless. So trying to rewrite that script is a lot of our work.
Yeah, I know that we talked a little bit about that in our conversation before. When you talk to your potential clients that you're working with, and just saying well, why do you need to make this out of waste? Isn't there another option? And just creating a different narrative around a product is definitely a whole other task unto itself. And so as we go into that kind of partner conversation, no matter what in supply chain, whether you're a small organization or a large one, partners, whether suppliers, manufacturers, or transporters, are going to be involved in making your supply chain, sustainable. So, maybe if you want to start, how does Fitbit, or maybe the tech world, go about identifying partners that maybe align with that, sustainability or responsible sourcing mission that organizations will have?
So I think when we talk about partners, it would really divide up to two parts. It would be suppliers and then other companies who are in a similar mission to what we're doing. So talking about the suppliers first, we have these step process to verify the suppliers following this standard that RBA, which is Responsible Business Alliance. This is similar to what Kevin talked about, but it would be like a coalition of IT industries gathering up together to make sure that their supply chain is getting done correctly. So we would do a code of conduct. We would send the code of conduct to suppliers, making sure that there's no forced labor, all the minimum wage is meeting the standards, and all the legal benefits are getting provided to the workers. So doing basic steps like that would be the essential, and if those steps are not met, then we cannot have any sort of partnerships. And then second would be doing some sort of due diligence, which can involve already existing information that we as an industry have on that supplier, or sometimes we would go on internet doing more intensive research on whether the supplier got called out in the NGO, or if there's any other problems that we see as a risk. We would go deeper into that risk, making sure that there's no, like a violation involved in their supply chain. And then lastly, we would do annual audit. We would sometimes physically send in the auditors coming from the firms verified by RBA, and sometimes we would actually go in like ourselves and check the facilities to make sure everything is getting done correctly. And lastly, there's this thing called CAPA. It's Corrective and Preventive Action. So we do is after we get the audit results, we would go through each section one by one, communicating with the suppliers throughout the year, making sure if some of the violations were seen, we would be helping them correct the actions. And then for the partners with other companies, we would have monthly meetings talking about different topics. Like I said, conflict mineral is a huge issue in IT industry. So we would have discussion about how to identify these conflict minerals in our supply chain, and how can we shift away from those, and making sure that no conflicted labor is involved.
Yeah, great, Una. I think that, at least for me, responsible sourcing within the tech world is definitely new and not necessarily something that maybe on my end that I've heard a lot about. So it's really interesting to hear, conflict minerals has been a term that I've heard of, but looking at seeing that organizations are looking into that part of their supply chain and how that's impacting their workers, and then also just the environment is really great to know. What do you think that there is a common really goal towards implementing these responsible sourcing practices within most tech industries, or do you feel like is it a new concept, or do you think it's something that has been happening for a while?
It's definitely not a new concept. It's something that actually IT industry has been struggling for a while. In a lot of, actually most cases, we use gold or other conflicted metals that are very essential to basically allow a bunch of IT devices to connect and make sure that the signal is going on. So that means that if we have to use those conflicted minerals, how can we make sure that those are not coming from the covered country, which are where the wars are taking place. So it's been a long process. It definitely takes several different middlemen. So it's really hard for us to track down the original source. But what we can do for our best is send in the survey to our suppliers, who then will send a survey to their suppliers, and do our best to track down as much as possible to the origin. So it's been long discussion.
Yeah, Parker and Kevin, do you guys have any insight on this question of just how to go about identifying your partners, and then also whether they have the capability to uphold your sourcing standards?
Yeah, I think for us, it's all about incentives. A lot of these companies are more conventional in the way they think about things, right? Regarding minerals, right? It's extracting precious minerals from certain countries and transporting to another country. That's what they're good at. Within our sector, it's a lot of transportation, it's a lot of sourcing, it's a lot of manufacturing. Their core competency is that, not sustainability. So by providing the necessary incentives, be it discounts or better deals or larger portion of our business, they're incentivized to make internal changes that are aligned with our overall sustainability goals. So for us, it's definitely incentives.
Great. Parker, what about you? Do you have any thoughts?
Just to piggyback on the incentive piece, speaking as a small, very early stage startup, the pitch for sustainability is not always the way in, even though that's, core to our mission core to, what we want to do as a company. Our partners are often margin strapped and struggling to pay rent, pay their employees, things like this. So if we can present, a different value package or a different value add for our services, it might get at what we're ultimately trying to do, which is sustainability. And that's kind of the way that we see getting into those partnerships longer term, is providing a lot of value.
Great. Yeah. So before we move on to our next question, I just wanted to remind the audience to definitely chime in with your questions for our panelists. Again, we're going to get to them at the end. But we'd love to hear from you and what your thoughts are on these questions as well. To go back to our panelists, I'd love to talk more about moving. Another part of like partners, that you can maybe think of, is your customers and people that you're working with, beyond just your suppliers or manufacturers. So I'd love to know, maybe Kevin, if you want to jump off on this, what your communication looks like to your customers about your sourcing, and how, I know that you talked about transparency, and maybe that capability of full transparency is not like capable within Nike, but what does that communication look like right now?
Yeah. That's a great question, in the sense that Nike is battling an uphill battle in terms of its history within the space of human rights violations and complicated past within Southeast Asia. I think we really struggle with that internally, right? Because we know we're not a Patagonia, right? We can't stand up and tell the story that Patagonia can tell, right? On the other side, we serve the global populace at a price point that Patagonia simply can't. We have the ear and the eyes of the world, right? And Nike, honestly, we are a storytelling company, right? We are a marketing company. And I think for us, how we communicate with our customers is less so through our products, but through our athletes and our coworkers, right? If LeBron James stands up and tells you to care, if Serena Williams stands up and tells you to care, if Andre Agassi, Michael Jordan, all of our colleagues, right, stand up and tell the world this, we get the liberals, we get the conservatives, we get the women, we get the man, we get the young, we get the poor, right? That's where we think we see our role in all of this, is leveraging our athletes and our coworkers to tell the story of sustainability, and having the product to back up and walk the walk. So I think that's how we see it.
Yeah, you guys definitely have amazing, faces to your organization and stories to tell. So it's wonderful that you can utilize them to tell a sustainability story as well, and one for the environment. So Parker, and do you have any other thoughts on what this communication looks like, maybe to your customers, about your sourcing? If you maybe have some thoughts.
Yeah. So similar to Kevin's story, Fitbit may not be the most innovative company in sustainability IT industry. However, we are trying to, with the limited resource that we have, we are making efforts to address the issues that our customers have gave us feedback. So for instance, again, conflict mineral is just a huge issue in IT industry. And what we as an industry try to do is, after we identify certain minerals within our supply chain, next step that we as an industry are trying to do is identify for each of our products whether conflict minerals are involved. So then we can tell the customer here, like some of our product may have potentially have conflict minerals, but this is the product that we identify that for sure there is no forced labor involved. So we are being transparent about that information and giving customers options to choose to make the right choice. And another thing would be the packaging issue, where a lot of our engineers, not just for Fitbit, but industry in general, are working on reducing the packaging size and replacing the plastic packaging into compostable packaging. That's also something that we want to make sure that customers feel better about themselves for choosing the better packaging boxes. One issue that we have with this is that a lot of IT products tend to have issues with paper or recycled packaging, because it won't be shiny when you open the packaging if it's not in plastic, because a lot of the debris would come out if it's in recycled materials. So that's something that a lot of engineers in this industry is working on to make sure that customers are satisfied while we're helping customers to make better eco-friendly choices.
Great. So it seems like a question that just came in was just like, is using responsible materials or minerals a viable option for like tech products? This is just like specifically towards you. So I'm assuming that this is something that is currently being like worked on and a space of innovation within the tech world.
I actually asked recycled minerals specifically, not just recycled minerals.
Got it. Thank you.
So it would really depend on what kind of mineral we're talking about. If it's something like aluminum, a lot of times it's getting collected and reformed so they can be used in different product. And also it really depends on how much we can collect back our product. And then from there, we would have to extract each of the components that are going into the IT devices, which sometimes can be hard and it's a lot of effort. So what we're doing right now is we are in conversation with different NGOs to help us collect back the product. And then from there, we work on repairability and try to close our loop so we can get back our materials as much as possible. Of course, it won't be 100% recyclable. It won't be recyclable, but we are collecting back as much as possible, just like the other companies.
Great. So just kind of piggybacking off of this question, I think a lot of the talk around Centennial and Gen Z generations is that there's maybe a more of a drive to buy, products that are, have more of a mission behind them or are responsibly sourced. I'm curious to see if you guys have seen any changes in demand for, responsibly sourced products within your role or organization. And whoever maybe has a thought on this can jump right in.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on a little bit about the last question as well. But yeah, the consumer is definitely changing, and messaging is super important. But it's also kind of harping back to my last point. Sustainability is not always what people want to hear. You got to provide multiple points of value in your product. And I've talked a little bit about our sourcing on the front end with our material streams, but our customers are business to business relationships with farmers. So it's actually really interesting to talk to fellow businesses who might not even have sustainability goals on their immediate short list of agenda. But as a provider of an agricultural input, we can move the industry in a more circular and reusable kind of format. So currently, the mushroom industry uses single-use PET plastic bags to grow the majority of their produce. So something that we've been trying to communicate in the most effective and, I guess, least threatening way is to suggest some sort of reusable concept, growing the same format of produce out of a reusable circular model, and then also growing that same product or crop off what we often perceive as waste. So, when you're working business to business, you can sometimes have these direct conversations with your client, whereas you're selling direct to a customer, you sometimes have to be a little bit more crafty or just get a little bit more creative in other ways.
Awesome. Thanks, Parker. Anybody else have any thoughts on, the change in demand for more responsibly sourced products?
Yeah, I think the two brands that just jump out to me are Allbirds and Patagonia, right? Their entire MO is sustainable sourced wool and tree byproducts, and Patagonia speaks for itself. Whenever we compare our certain business lines with theirs, it's evident, right? I mean, Allbirds are comfortable, they look fine, but their whole message is sustainability. And I think you look at the millennial generation, it completely aligns with their value prop. And we actually hired a couple consulting firms to do some investigation into this. And the result is by 2025, so a mere 5-6 years from now, 75% of the fashion industry, right, will be consumed by Gen Z and millennials, right? And if you think about that, we inherently are better informed, we care, we're spending, a Wednesday lunch calling in to discuss responsible sourcing, right? It's loud and clear. And yes, like Cotopaxi is another company that's like that, right? So there's so many examples, and I think it would be silly for a brand like Nike or Adidas to not listen to the loud and clear message that the world is sending.
Great. And I have a question, maybe as a follow-up to that, Kevin, from one of the listeners. And their question is, Nike is a global company, and do you guys ever find any pushback from within Nike when trying to push sustainability initiatives? Or is it, a value very integral to your whole organization?
Yeah, the funny thing is, in Europe, it's so easy to convince people to do this. I think they are more progressive compared to North America in terms of how they see this. In Asia and Southeast Asia, they're frankly just affected by climate change more, right? So it's also an easier sell there. I think domestically, climate change for the worse is a very political issue. So I think I really like what Parker said in terms of sustainability is not always the way in. Efficiency is, right? And sustainability as a way to save money, I think it's a great platform. But I think, yes, we are a global company, but hilariously enough, our own country is the country that I think we have the most trouble trying to sell this message.
Yeah, I can see that being the case. Do you have any other thoughts on, the changes in demands from customers or partners for responsibly sourced products within tech?
I would say just like I'm always going back to conflict minerals is just a huge issue that what we consider the waste are the challenge that is coming out of our supply chain, but mostly just a lot of industry professionals are talking about using more technology such as like blockchain, like different ways to bring up transparency in our supply chain to just make sure that none of those child labor, forced labor are getting involved. And a lot of NGO pushback also they investigate companies publicizing about their conflict minerals report, and sometimes they track down to make sure that there's no conflicted labor and stuff like that. So we definitely have some push from a lot of NGOs. Sometimes customers also don't want any of those labors involved. So we have external stakeholders pushing the industry to do a better job in our supply chain.
Great. Yeah. So I wanted to just pose this question to you guys. We're in a very different world right now than we were 4 weeks ago. But I'd love to just, in general, how have your teams, been adapting and evolving, in an evolving world, whether that has to do with our current, experience with COVID or not. Parker, maybe if you want to start from as a more smaller team perspective, how have you guys and your partners been adapting and evolving in this time?
Yeah, sure. I think the name of the game with startups is, kind of constant chaos and being able to embrace that. So I think there is something to be said. Biology and this pandemic is literally screaming at us to adapt. Our methods of production, our methods of delivering products, and then really what I think has been done is really force us to think about what is truly essential to being happy and whole. So yeah, just to give a funny anecdote, like Grounded didn't start as an urban agriculture company at all. It was we were actually a direct-to-consumer cosmetic brand that was using coffee grounds as a main ingredient, and then we pivoted in a huge direction towards growing food slightly before COVID, but now it's like making a lot of sense. Like this is what you know, the world is in need of right now. We need local food. We need, you know, waste remediation, soil remediation, things like this. So just kind of always being flexible is very easy and necessary in entrepreneurship. And then just responding to what Kevin was saying regarding Patagonia and some of like the DNA differences between companies. You know, in the 70s, Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, like made it central to his mission and his you know, his ethos to make a brand that was for outdoor athletes, but it was also good for not just his stakeholders, but for the planet as well. So it's really important, if any of you are thinking about starting your own concept, starting a company, or entering into a young company, to really bring your values with it, because that's when you can really build a solid DNA or foundation for the company to move in that positive direction.
Yeah. Parker, just to kind of go on this innovation space, we had a question from the audience I'd like to pose to you now. And their question was, in your efforts to reduce and reuse waste produced by coffee makers and brewers and integrating that waste into usable agricultural product, have you considered taking human waste, i.e. urine, as an example, as a source of nutrients? And is there a capacity for your organization to divert human urine into fertilizer?
Yeah, Christopher, thank you for this question. What a wild concept. No, I haven't thought about urine specifically, but just to maybe harp on this a bit, because we are a circular business model, the residual kind of byproduct that comes out of our mushroom product is a super rich soil builder. So it's basically like a matrix of material that's been incubated, and all of these nutrients have been captured by mushroom mycelium, which is the majority organism of fungi. And we take that and we've been trying to integrate that into urban soil systems, such that we can, you know, rebuild degraded land, and kind of practice some of these fledgling myco-remediation techniques that really improve soils and absorb, you know, toxins, heavy metals in urban environments. So there's plenty of innovation within material use, especially organics and microbes of all kinds. So yeah, good suggestion. I'll look into that.
Great, thanks, Christopher. You know, Kevin and Una, the question before that I had was just, you know, in staying positive in this evolving world, can you just maybe talk about, you know, a time where you or your team had to, you know, innovate and adapt, whether that has to be like just a general challenge at work or within this COVID space? If you could bring that to the table, we'd love to hear it.
Sure, I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's funny because in our mantra within Nike sustainability is protect the future of sport. And in that mantra, our context was protect the earth, because if there's no earth, there is no sport. But within the COVID world, without people, there is also no sport. So, you know, we've shifted all of our supply chains, at least domestically, to make ventilators, face masks, because with a company with the scale of Nike, we do have the capabilities of doing that. So I think that's the first thing that we're doing. The second thing is something that's like actually very personal to me. I think when you look at all the digital workout, you know, platforms, right? Like SoulCycle, Peloton, even Nike internal resources, everyone is like 5'10", skinny, and like incredibly attractive and doing handstands, right? Reality is that's not everybody. That's not most people, right? And I think within the digital workout space platform, there's a huge gap in addressing people who are differently abled. And I think we have a mantra that says, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So we actually have an internal incubator and a venture capital firm, right, resided within Nike internally. And our CEO tasked that team to, within 2 weeks, acquire a platform that specifically empowers people who are differently abled and make it free to the general masses. We acquired a company called Joy, and that digital platform specifically targets people who are differently abled or just want, to be active in a non-handstand kind of way. So I think those are two specific ways that Nike is helping contribute to the COVID solution.
Wow, I love that. And it's great to see that that was integrated into the thought process, Kevin. What about you guys? What have been some ways that you guys have innovated and adapted?
Yeah, so for sure, Fitbit is a company that, basically help people track and analyze their health conditions. So right now, obviously, a lot of us can't go outside. So our new product basically integrated this function where people can check their heart rates and other more advanced health conditions so that they can just watch their condition and respond and basically be aware of their how they're doing. So that's something that we want to focus, not just walking around and then measuring the heartbeat. We want to do more than that. So that's the new features that we're taking consideration into. Even if you're indoor, what are the things that we can measure into and help provide customers essential information. And then going back to the supply chain, we understand that there's a lot of facilities in our supply chain that are closed down due to COVID. So another thing that we're in constant conversation with our supplier is that how do we still make sure that livable wages being given to workers, and how do we make sure that around this time where facilities are not being able to open, how do you make sure that the health benefits and other essential things are being given to the workers in our supply chain? So yeah, stuff like that.
Great. Good. Well, believe it or not, we're almost a few minutes away from our Q&A. So we really whipped through this already. So I just want to pose two more questions to you guys. And the first one is just, what really excites you about your field, and maybe what sustainability trends are you, excited about, regardless of maybe any halts with COVID, what have been some trends that you're excited about coming through? Kevin, do you have any that comes to mind, or what makes you excited about your field?
Yeah, I think clothes and fashion and apparel and sneakers are fundamentally how a lot of the world express themselves, right? So we have this really unique canvas and professional sector to play in. So I think everyone needs to wear clothes, right? Or unless, you're a specific part of the population. But I think we are able to use our brand and our storytelling ability to hopefully mobilize the future generation, especially when our brand is so emotional and so personal. So I think that really excites me. I think a trend that I've seen that would just be my general advice to everybody is just the return of upcycled and thrifting and vintage. I think a lot of people are realizing the inherent worth and just the better handicraft that resided in earlier generations and decades. But yeah, I think the return of upcycled and vintage is an exciting trend that I hope continues.
Yeah, I saw Parker nodding furiously, yes. So Parker, was there anything else that you had to add about what excites you about what you're doing, and maybe some sustainability trends, whether that's upcycling? I know that's integral to your name of your company. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin mentioned something, obviously upcycling is dear to my heart and should be to all. It's very, very interesting. But it's also returning to this practical self-reliance that I feel we've kind of lost in our society, being able to mend things, being able to grow your own food, being able to, have the practical skills to extend the life of anything. And that's really what upcycling is. What really excites me about my field specifically is, so we're growing an alternative protein, a non-meat protein, but we're not trying to gimmick it and make it this funky steak alternative or tofu lookalike. it is what it is, and people are eating more plant-based diets, and I love to see that in our culture kind of expand. Not telling anyone not to eat meat. Meat has its place, but integrating more alternative proteins into your diet is always a good thing. And then one more thing I'll add is, upcycling within organic waste, I think is a new concept that's kind of coming online. There are a lot of startups that I know of that are really trying to become like a fixture or a service that attach onto an industry and kind of become almost like a metabolism for that industry to solve its waste needs. So that's really exciting and creative.
Great. Yuna, what about you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the upcycling issue and also circular economy, where actually most of the companies in IT industry have figured out or started discussing about bringing their products and closing the loop. But beyond that, last year at our RBA conference, one of the discussions that was going on was that some companies started doing a business out of collecting metals and basically, like Jessica talked about before, basically recycling the metals and reselling those metals back to the companies that might use it for their products. So it is getting a step further. People are taking more seriously about circular economy, and I'm really excited to hear more discussions going on in this industry. Another trend that I see is that before a lot of companies used to focus on what are we doing for consumers, like we're using less harmful chemicals for customers' safety. Now we're focusing more on what are the chemicals we're using in the facilities that might reduce the harm to workers. So we're focusing also on the worker safety, what rights workers get. Like that's something essential to responsible sourcing, and I'm really glad to see that we're considering the whole value chain and trying to make sure that we see improvement in every area.
Great, thanks, Yuna. That's awesome. And my last question before we get into the Q&A, like we talked about in the beginning of this session, the theme for this week for Green Program is mobilizing change and really taking action, whether that's individually or nationally and globally. So I'd love to hear if what is like an action step that anyone can take after this event to help mobilizing change for a sustainable future. So Parker, do you want to start, and maybe one action step that you would have for the audience to make this change for the world?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've been thinking about this question. I think it's so easy to, especially during this time, to feel like we're not doing enough, or not being productive, or like not we're restricted to do things. I would encourage people, and this has been super helpful in my life, just to try to reframe that a bit. And realize that it is about rest and taking that time to really reflect on what you want to do. I heard Yuval Noah Harari, the author of *Sapiens*, answer a very similar question at this talk in New York, and he's an avid meditator. So maybe it's not meditation for you, but some sort of self-awareness practice to really cultivate in your day-to-day, even if it's just 10 minutes of journaling or reflecting, really can make a difference on how you can be uniquely helpful to this movement as a whole.
Great, thanks so much. Do you have an action step for our audience?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, no matter what kind of career path you take, it doesn't have to be necessarily the responsible sourcing team or, a sustainability team within a company. Everyone can contribute to this kind of effort. You can be in finance team and basically convince your team members why doing a sustainability project within your company is essential and why certain funding should be provided. Or you can be in marketing team, helping sustainability teams work getting attention, or you can just be an engineering team, helping design more sustainable components of your product. You can be in any kind of career as long as you have the right sustainability mindset, and you can definitely contribute to this effort.
Yeah, I love that. There was a question from our audience that was saying, how do you deal with maybe a corporate culture that doesn't have this underlying sustainability mission? And I think that was like a really good note, that it doesn't, no matter where you are within an organization, you can advocate for sustainability values, no matter where you are. Kevin, though, can we have your action steps as well?
Yeah, I think to my knowledge, most of the audience members are students or early career starters. My simple ask, and I think a really easy thing for all of y'all to do, is in your next interview, after you've crushed all the questions and the interviewer asks, do you have any questions? Ask them about what their sustainability goals are. Ask their company what their sustainability initiatives are. Imagine if a person comes into the, Penn State and interviews 30 people, and every single 30 individuals ask that question. Even if that company didn't care, they're gonna be like, whoa, college students today care, and we need to be prepared to answer that, right? Super easy lift. And if they don't have an answer for you, maybe consider not working for them, right? Or two, if they do have an answer, like amazing, and you've learned just something new about them. But in your next interview, ask the interviewer what their company's sustainability goals are.
Yeah, love that. Thanks, Kevin. So now we're going to go into a little bit of Q&A for a few minutes. To keep it with Kevin, because we do have a question specifically for you and Nike. I'm talking more about that upcycling, trend that we hope to see. Their question is, as more companies begin rolling out programs to buy gently used garments, would Nike consider something similar? And yeah, especially given the rise of popularity of athleisure.
Yeah, we do have that actually.
Cool.
It's a really small business as of now, but it's up and running. I'm sure COVID has impaired it slightly, but it's called Rescue, R-E-S-K-U, a play on the word rescue. We have a 30-day return policy, no questions asked, on all of our footwear. So we get a lot of gently used shoes back from our wholesalers or our brick and mortar stores. In the past, we used to grind those shoes up to make AstroTurf, right? Or recycled materials and, contribute it back to our circular economy. But we realized the inherent waste in that. So for some of the more gently used products, we post them on resku.com, resku.com. And you can buy, highly collectible or gently worn shoes at a fraction of the cost. Another one that I love is Wornwear, which is Patagonia's sidearm of this. It's wornwear.patagonia.com. You can buy gently used Patagonia products at like a third, a fourth, a fifth of the original cost. But long story short, we do have it. It's called Rescue.
Awesome, great. Well, I hope that whoever question was can go on and check that out. So yeah, another question that I can be posed to any of you. And this is, what kind of changes have you made in your personal life to reduce waste? And maybe what are some examples of ways to reuse and upcycle common consumer items so that an everyday person feels like they can actually make an effective change? Parker, do you maybe want to have some insight on this first?
Yeah, I don't know whoever asked, and I don't know if you're in an urban environment, but despite living in a tiny apartment, I've made a pledge to myself to compost and to take it to my, local drop-off. That's a really small and easy thing you can do, and it really does support your local kind of ecosystem. There are a lot of nonprofits in most cities that are processing compost to build soil, and whether that's used to grow food or used to just regenerate your parks, it's a super easy thing you can do. And then also, if you're a coffee drinker, I could send you a bunch of recipes to make, exfoliating face masks, soaps, things that we used to do in our previous stage, that are super easy to do at home.
Great. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this question? or feedback?
It might be,
Sure.
oh,
Go ahead, Yuna. Go ahead, Yuna.
I was just gonna say, it might be just our campus specifically. For audience's information, I am also still in school, and I do see a lot of campus initiatives in reducing waste. So Berkeley campus has a lot of coffee shops, boba shops around campus, and what we do is that we initiate students to use basically like a recyclable straw instead of using plastic straws. So it would be mandated actually by the campus and city that you'll be charged more for plastic waste, and definitely encouraging the customers to bring in the recyclable straws. Another thing would be that, just like making sure that you don't go out every often to buy clothes. A lot of my friends and people around me go to thrift shop and buy clothes there instead. You don't necessarily always have to have the fancy new clothes, like sometimes you may be just working out, you may be just, just being at home, and sometimes like in that options, I prefer using the used clothes, so stuff like that.
Awesome. Great. Kevin, go for it.
I think to piggyback on what Yuna said, a mantra that I have, and I think a lot of the sustainable apparel professionals have, is the meat and potato rule, right? So it should be 80-20, right? 80% of your closet should be potato, right? Things that you can wear on a day-to-day basis, like mindlessly. That black hoodie, those black leggings, right? That gray zip up, that black V-neck sweater, right? Things that are kind of mindless and are timeless. 20% should be meat, right? In the sense that they are your statement pieces, the ones that are more eccentric, less wear. So when you go shopping, when you go thrifting, regardless of what you're doing, think about, are you buying a meat or are you buying potato, right? And what is the kind of dollar per wear that you're getting out of it, right? Think about those kind of different things. And I think that would be a good framework for you to, I guess, evaluate your purchasing decisions.
Great. So one of our last questions, I think, for the session, since we're almost at 1 and I don't want to keep anyone too late, does anybody have any feedback on, maybe what the education background and skills are valuable for launching a career in responsible sourcing? Does anybody have any feedback on this one?
I can speak as a student perspective. So I personally majored in environmental science. I'm still working on the degree, and I feel like just having comprehensive knowledge in chemistry, biology, things like that, they all come back. It might seem like it's not applicable to sustainability, but eventually at the end, when you're studying like energy management, water management, things like that, they all come back. So general educations in those science areas was definitely helpful for me. Another thing, not just for responsible sourcing, but supply chain in general, I definitely think that knowing how to use Excel correctly and doing all the macro is definitely essential. We do a lot of Excel to do risk assessment, and when we analyze the risk, Excel macro is very important. So just being familiar with Excel is definitely useful. Other than that, just like, reading a lot of articles about industry trends. I worked at CPG. I've also be involved in coffee industry. Now I'm in IT. So just having different, like, I guess, updated background in different industry would definitely open up more route for you when you're applying for different companies.
Awesome, great. And Kevin or Parker, do you guys have any feedback for this question?
Oh man, it was so comprehensive.
Yeah, not a simple one.
I think the big thing is, like, if you are fortunate enough to work within the sustainability sector, right? Like, that is amazing in the sense that that's what you love personally, right? And it shouldn't feel like work to you, although it is probably work. So in your free time, in your downtime, in your recreational time, spend some time learning more about these random things, right? So going to random conferences, talking to random people, speaking with people like us, right? We love talking about this, right? Like, I'm that awkward person at a dinner party that says, like, hey, is that a recycled cotton t-shirt that you have, right? I think the benefit of working in all of this is, like, it doesn't feel like work. So pursuing this wholeheartedly, I think, is really important, but that's not really helpful. So one piece of advice that I really like that Yuna gave earlier is Like, you don't have to have sustainability in your job title to work in the sustainability sector, but compounded with that is sustainability is this huge nebulous topic. Pick one piece of the pie that you care about and just tackle it. Don't try and eat the entire pie. Don't try and save the world, right? Because collectively we can. You yourself cannot. Pick one and just crush it. So that's my parting thought.
Love it. Crush it, guys. Parker, what about you?
If I could just add to that, yeah, I think, you know, we talk a lot about systems thinking and circular thinking in this area. That can be somewhat overwhelming and daunting. Like, if you're looking at the entire system or all the problems that exist, you're gonna get overwhelmed. So it's this like shifting, the ability to shift between, you know, your little niche. Mine is just coffee waste right now, but like I'm interested in everything, right? So an intellectual curiosity of looking at the system, but also an ability to have that discipline and drill down on your core competency as much as you can.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Well, this has been an amazing hour of conversation and learning from my end, and I'm sure the audience's end as well. And we appreciate your time so much, as well as the audience. We're, you know, coming a little bit past 1, so I want to respect everybody's time so that, you know, everyone can get back to their days. We want to thank you again for joining us on this panel. We have still 4 other panels this week that are talking on different topics around sustainability. So we totally encourage you to sign up for more sessions and tune in. I know Parker is going to be on another one tomorrow. So if you want to hear more from Parker about rooting for global food security, definitely sign up for that one. And we hope to see you there. If you're interested in the green program and becoming, you know, more of a sustainability leader and learning, you know, different skills like the 3 panelists here and joining a really amazing community, you know, we'll definitely put our website on the chat bar, and then also all the RSVPs will receive that information as well. We'll be recording this session, so we'll be able to go back and get all the good nuggets of knowledge from our panelists. But again, we really appreciate you guys all being here. Thank you, Una, Parker, and Kevin. Have a great rest of your day. We'll definitely talk to you guys soon. And thanks everyone again for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you on another panel. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.